So now we are live. Hello and welcome everybody present here at the webinar of Draftsman Asia titled titled From Law Student to a Draftsman. Now, while looking out for the resource persons for this session, we were really looking forward for somebody who could just understand the complexities which a law student goes through and a law student suffers while looking out for a particular mentor as far as the legal drafting is concerned. Now, while talking to many people, while researching for many people, we came across and met Mr. Gagandeep Singh, who is present with us right now for the session. And Mr. Gagandeep is a phenomenal speaker and a phenomenal draftsman. He has a very wide experience in drafting. He is a alumni from the University of Punjab, and he has a very good experience in drafting and assisting his clients in all sorts of matters, complex matters, and civil drafting, criminal drafting, and all other kinds of drafting matters. Now, with us, he would be sharing the particulars that how can a law student look at drafting, and is legal drafting only about pleadings, or are there other things which one has to be looking upon? So now the floor is open to Mr. Gagandeep Singh. Sir, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Ashay, for this generous introduction. And it's a pleasure to be on board Draft Panacea. I think it's a great initiative. And ladies and gentlemen, whoever are tuned to this live session, good evening. And my name is Gagandeep Singh. As Ashay has already introduced, I'm practicing at the High Court of Punjab and Haryana at Chandigarh. Now, in the next 1 hour, I would endeavor to talk a little bit about drafting and as to why drafting becomes such an important aspect of law, and also the means and measures that you as a young student or perhaps a fresh lawyer can adopt so as to improve your skills with respect to drafting. At the outset, please be informed that when I use the word drafting, I do not confine it to law only. As of today, we are using the term drafting in a myriad of ways. Drafting is used in law, one. Two, you are continuously communicating through written forms to your friends, your relatives, to your teachers, the institutions where you work, your workplaces, and even to your statutory authorities such as the electricity department, the tax department, so on and so forth. In that respect, drafting assumes, I must say, heightened significance. Now, moving ahead, now I've been told that I have to speak for an hour, but I'd like to restrict myself to about 40 to 45 minutes, because then I would like to take a few questions which the audience might have, so that the platform could become a little more interactive. But perhaps now, in the beginning itself, I'd like to tell you as to why I got a little bit inclined towards introducing and ensuring that the importance of drafting reaches to every law student and to every fresh lawyer. And I must confess that I am too fresh out of college lawyer with not so many years of experience, but yes, certain problems that I felt that accompanied legal drafting and even drafting otherwise is what brings me here to interact with you. Now, when I joined the profession, I saw that a lot of work that was coming from in and around the rural areas of Punjab and Haryana, because I'm practicing in the High Court, was confined to drafting that was not up to the mark, and drafting that, if could have been done in a better manner, could have let the litigants win their matters in a smooth manner. that made me realize that there is a gap between what the litigant wants and what is being given to him via pleadings in various courts. Second, the second issue that I realized is a lot of my friends were into different kinds of businesses. Say someone was in marketing, someone's in selling heavy machinery and all of that. I realized that all of my friends, most of my friends, were using agreements that were downloaded from the internet, but were agreements that were cyclostyle, that were of the same format and content, though were being used for different avenues. Say now, it would be misconceived for a person who is in the marketing field to use the same agreement with his customers as a person who is from a business that deals in renting apartments is using. Now, when I talked to them, they felt that there was not really a need to use those agreements because usually their work was oral and there was a 0.1 chance of getting into a dispute. Eventually, when a couple of them did suffer a few hiccups in their businesses, they did realize that if they had drafted a clear agreement, an agreement that was customized and that was suited to their own needs of their business, they would be in a better position to resolve that dispute. That is where I started initiating conversations with respect to customized and exclusive contracts and agreements and trying to help businesses that are fresh, that are not too many years old, to have a solid legal framework so that at the end of the day, a business does not have to suffer on account of lack of legal documents in place. Now, this all of this concept of drafting, as I see it, is a little bit missing in law schools because I'm given to understand that all of those who are watching this webinar are majorly students. Now, because there is a little gap between what is there in the practical field and what is being taught, or perhaps what is not being taught in colleges, let me tell you that drafting is a skill that is self-taught. One may help you develop a primary or a basic structural framework as to how to go about improving your skills. But at the end of the day, it is how consistent and how regular you are with respect to improving your skills that will establish whether or not you are good at drafting or not. Now, as I move and as I progress further into this webinar, I'm going to tell you 3 simple ways to improve your written communication. And written communication, of course, does include legal drafting and even otherwise any communication that you indulge in on an everyday basis. Because, at this point in time, I'd like to take a pause and go back to my school days where one of my teachers told me and my class one day, and she said, and I quote, that it is better to be kept quiet and be thought of as a fool than to speak and remove all doubts. So that really means that if you are at all speaking, whether via written methods or even orally, it is extremely important that your choice of words is impeccable, that the use of grammar is absolutely on point, and you avoid using redundant sentences while speaking or writing. So I will quickly move on to these 3 ways to improve your skills with respect to drafting, and I must quote that I am someone who's greatly benefited with these methods, and I'm sure that these methods will go a long way for even you all to understand the importance of drafting and will help you improve your skills. So the first one is improving your vocabulary. Now, when a child is 3 or 4 years or 5 years of age, Believe it or not, he has a capacity of remembering of about 800 words a year. That might sound astonishing because as and when a person progresses over the years, his number of words that he can remember over a period of a year reduces to about 80 to 100 words. And that is only if he or she is making an endeavor to study such new words. So this gap of remembering and knowing and using new words has to be covered. Now the question is, how are you to cover that gap? Well, the answer is pretty simple. All you have to do is remember to read one word a day that you may find on the internet, or perhaps reading judgments, or reading your books, or listening an interview, so on and so forth. Now, this one word, write it on a small piece of paper and stick it at a place where it's easily visible. Write a common sentence that might include this word. Now, all you have to do is for the next 2 to 3 days, you have to let that word sink in your mind, body, and soul by using that word as frequently as you can with your friends, with your family, while you're writing something, and just about framing sentences as much as you can using that word. A lot of us make this mistake that in a bid to remember a lot of words and in a bid to improve our vocabulary overnight, we tend to prepare a list of 10 to 20 words and assume that we'll be able to remember these words and use them because we've written it on a list, and that constitutes as the list that you're going to put all your focus into. But ladies and gentlemen, one must realize that remembering the meaning of words, or perhaps remembering new words, is not important. What is important is that how frequently and how effectively you are using these words. If you're not able to use these words on a regular basis, it is no use to put it in your treasure and boast about you knowing these words. So, a good way is to remember one word for 2 or 3 days, use it frequently, progress, then figure out a new word, find out a new word, add that new word to your existing list, and then gradually move on remembering and using those new words. So at the end of the day, you'll realize that you'll have about, say, at the end of the month, say about 7 to 8 words. But these words will be words that you will be using so frequently, and you will see that people will ask you, what does this word mean? Don't feel shy to share the meaning of that word. And you'll see that the strength of your vocabulary, the effectiveness of your vocabulary increases over the subsequent months. So this is one way. The second way is perhaps a way that we all are and were using in the past, but we do not know what it is called. Now this word is this tip is called mind mapping. Now mind mapping is one of the most mind-blowing ways to improve your existing knowledge, because the more knowledge that you possess, the better you will be from separating the grain from the chaff and ensuring that what you write is to the point and what you speak is effective enough to for the other person to understand and get your idea. Now let me give you an example. Say, for instance, you are studying about, say, the President of the United States of America. So you type Joe Biden on Google Net and you read about his antecedents, how much he's qualified, and for how long is his tenure going to be in USA as the president. Now, while reading, you find a link, a small link in that article that talks about US elections. Once you've read that article, make sure you go back to that link which talked about a related concept that was US elections and click on that link. Now you see you have about 10 to 12 options or links that talk about US elections. Now remember, we started with Joe Biden studying about the president of the USA. Then we shifted to found a link called the US elections. We clicked on US elections and we found a whole list of what and how the US elections function. Once you've reached that, click on any link and start reading about US elections. Over the course of time, you will reach, I'm sure, a point wherein there'll be, say, a word that talks about the US electorate. Once you have read substantially about US elections, go back to that article, click on the US electorate system and read about it. Now, you see a chain has been formed from what started as studying about the President of the United States of America, took you to understanding how and why and the process behind the US elections and what it entails. And subsequently, you transferred your mind and your interest to what is US electorate all about. What I'm trying to drive home, the point is that eventually what started as a research for one topic traveled and traversed into three different topics and made you a wiser personality at the end of that half an hour session of reading. And that is also what law is all about. Sometimes you might read an article about a certain thing or a certain judgment or a certain law point. Eventually, you'll reach a point where there is a sentence written or perhaps a link given about something of another legal topic, and which you would not know about. But you'll be too lazy to actually click and read about it. And that is where we all falter. Click on that link, know more about it. Once you've become wiser about that link, come back to what you were reading and continue from where you left. And you'll realize that eventually, if you had wanted to grasp 10% knowledge on a certain subject, you'll end up with about 40 to 45% of knowledge. And that is what is going to make all the difference. So that is mind mapping. So as far as now, I've told you two ways. One is vocab and second is mind mapping. Now the third and the most important way to improve your drafting skills and your written communication with respect to legal drafting especially is reading judgments. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we all are too busy attending a lot of webinars, a lot of small time internships, short duration internships. But be honest to yourself and ask, are you really focusing on reading the law? Are you reading judgments that are coming every now and then on a variety of websites? There are perhaps about 10 to 12 alerts that one gets every day where the law gets decided, the law gets upheld, and somewhere the law gets overruled. One major reason as to why students, and I would say a good portion of lawyers also do not read judgment is perhaps they feel that the judgments are too bulky or too voluminous. Now, the idea is to not burden yourself and read a judgment at one given point of time in one go. The idea to improve your knowledge of law is to read it over a period of time and not burden yourself with such a bulky document. Say, now, why is judgment important? One, it will give you knowledge of the existing law. Two, it will tell you what law it has set aside previously. Three, it will give you a different insight into the vocab being used and the legal lexicon that is being inculcated in the judgment, the law points that are canvassed in that judgment. And four, it will give you a broader perspective of a variety of subjects. It is necessary that someday you read a civil judgment, the other day you're reading a judgment on, say, anticipatory bail, or perhaps third day you're reading a judgment on, company law. But the idea is to grasp hold of a variety of subjects so that at the end of the day, you have substantial knowledge of law. Now, this is a way that I, found out a few days ago that has really helped me. Now, let me give you an example. So, for instance, I have this judgment that I'm reading, but it is on one long page and I've stapled it at one corner and I have to turn my pages every now and then, which makes it a little difficult for me to carry it here and then, because it's printed on a legal sheet. On the contrary, what one can do is this. Now, all you have to do is make a booklet of the judgment. While you download the PDF document, there's an option of printing wherein you can print it on a booklet form. Now, this becomes smaller, and what happens is, in a judgment, say if now this judgment is about 60 pages, but this the number of pages that have been used is only 15, because on one page two pages have been printed back and front. So essentially, on one page, there are 4 pages of the judgment that one can read. That is the greatest advantage of saving paper. And second, you can carry it wherever you want. So once you read judgments, you'll realize the beauty of structuring arguments. You'll realize now essentially a judgment is divided into 3 or 4 parts. The first one is where the origin of the judgment is given as to what order from what court is being impugned and what is the law point that is under discussion in a certain judgment. Second, as you progress, you'll figure out the various arguments that advocates on both sides have propagated, have apprised to the court. Third, the judge will give his or her observations on on those arguments that have been put forth. And finally, the law will be laid down. You will realize that after reading a judgment, you'll become wise. Why so? For the simple reason that not only will you get to know the law, you'll also figure out the way in how an advocate has put his case forward, and sometimes a case that may not be too strong, but has been made strong by that lawyer by showing a number of judgments, a number of data, a number of great facts in the case, so as to convince the judge. So judgment reading becomes all the more important if you really want to make an impact in your drafting. Now, the second leg of the argument of my lecture is how to draft. Ladies and gentlemen, when I recently joined the profession, there was a senior who used to draft impeccably. Am I audible? Hello?
Yeah, you're audible now.
All right. So Roshan says yes. Well, thank you, Roshan. So as I was saying, so this senior drafted impeccably. So I went on to ask that, sir, what is it that makes you draft your pleadings in such an effective manner? So he says that before you appear in a court, Gagan, your draft reaches the judge. So before one can make an appearance before a court, the draft is already before that court. So it is important that you as a lawyer are judged well through that draft that you've put forth. And if your pleadings are not in the correct perspective, maybe tomorrow, the next day, when you're presenting your case, you're going to have a tough time. To avoid that, drafting assumes a great amount of significance. Now, coming to the next leg of drafting, legal drafting, is how to really come out and draft. Now, when I tell you these tips may be helpful to you in perhaps the non-legal field as well. In instances where you're presenting something before your college group or your classroom, or you're writing an answer, or you're writing a speech, or of course, when you are drafting any sort of pleadings before a court. The first and the most important aspect of drafting is legal research or research. About 90% of us are doing what is not supposed to be done. What we are doing is we draft an entire communication or an entire pleading, and then we progress to researching the law or researching the subject. However, it has to be vice versa. Only if you research well, only if you're well versed with the law, and only if you know how to how what analysis has to be done, can you be able to effectively draft your communication. With respect to law, I see a lot of people who are only concentrating on these legal search engines to rely for their researches. But at the end of the day, one has to explore all the options to actually effectively draft your pleadings and communications. Start from a Google research. Sometimes there may be more often than not situations wherein you might not find the right law point for your pleadings from a search engine. Now, essentially, this is not something to be afraid of. What you can do is you can directly go on to your Google search, type the keywords of your proposition, read articles about it, read judgments that may be given in a few links. And then once you grasp a hold on the provision, on the proposition, you'll have better ideas with respect to key points that need to be entered in search engines that can give you the right result. So essentially, legal research has an important part if you really want to draft well. Do not draft and research, but research and then draft. Because what happens is once you have data, then you can narrow down your scope of pleadings and reach to about say 10% of that data, pick up the relevant portions and then draft effectively, ensuring that you've included every minute aspect of the subject with respect to which you're communicating or with respect to which you are drafting a legal pleading. That one can really use. Now, this FAR method is very simple. The F stands for facts, the A stands for analysis or legal submissions, and the R stands for relief. Now, let me go one by one towards these three facets. Number one is facts. Ladies and gentlemen, it is extremely important to write the correct, true, relevant facts for whichever communication and whichever pleading you are drafting. Your facts are going to define your case. If you're low on facts, ensure that you figure out the right facts. Do not write incorrect facts. This will put a terrible impression on the person who is reading this, who is reading it, or who might know of the true facts. So ensure that your facts are written in a cohesive manner, in a coherent manner. They start from the oldest event in the timeline and then slowly progress towards the latest happening. So that's how you can carve out a story in your mind, and that's how the reader will figure out how this communication is to be read. The second aspect is analysis. Now, this is important. Once you have written down your facts, make sure that you analyze and write your submissions with respect to those facts. Now, that is where your research comes in. For every fact you've written, make sure that you have enough research, make sure you have enough grounds, ensure that you have legal submissions, and most importantly, ensure that you have enough law to support facts that you've written and to support why your case deserves a hearing and why your case has a merit. For every draft that you make it from a perspective that the person who is not in any way engaged with your matter can read it in an effective manner. If such person cannot figure out the story, and even though no matter how hard you worked on your research and your facts, your draft will be of no use. So once you've drafted, feel free to consult fellow people, your friends, or perhaps your seniors to make them read and find out faults and figure out whether they, as individuals, as third parties, are able to find out what you're trying to canvas through your draft or not. The third is relief. Any draft, any letter, any communication, any pleading is incomplete if you do not seek relief. For instance, if I am drafting a letter to my principal saying that I require leave for a week because I have certain engagements at home, I will write my facts that so and so is happening and therefore I require leave. I will write as to why I should get leave. But in the end, if I'm unable or if I forget or if I make a mistake to not write the relief that I'm finally seeking, in this case, the number of days that I'll be taking leave and perhaps asking that the principal does not reduce my marks that are to be given with respect to my attendance, I'm going to be in trouble. Make sure your relief is well drafted. Spend a lot of time figuring out the right words, the right sentences, the right grammar while couching your relief in a single sentence. It is your relief that the court is going to read and give it to you. If you ask for less, you're going to get less. If you're going to ask more, then perhaps you have greater leverage to argue your case and fight for a better or maybe a greater relief. And the fourth one, and a primary rule of drafting is editing. Ladies and gentlemen, edit, edit, and edit as much as you want and as much as you can before you finalize your draft. What happens is that once we are in a flow of events, more often than not, we tend to make grammatical errors in our draft. We tend to make spelling errors in our draft, which, if not read and corrected before finalizing the draft, can lead to blunders. Sometimes when we're drafting something, there might be a situation where we've written two contradictory statements because understandably we were in a different frame of mind. We were drafting, we had a lot of research in front of us and we couldn't notice that. So when you are editing, sit with a fresh mind. Reread your document from the top and see if it is making sense or not. If there is a mistake, correct it and start from the beginning and reread your draft again. Until that point in time when you realize your draft has no errors, you haven't had to touch the keyboard or you haven't had to touch the pen again to correct your draft, do not finalize it. Because the lesser the number of errors are, the better your draft is going to be. And sometimes the situation is that you may have drafted your communication beautifully, but there are certain commas, semicolons, full stops, capital letters that one may miss while in the flow of things. Now, for budding lawyers, this might seem to be a very trivial issue because you might say that, at the end of the day, nobody really cares about whether or not you're using the right punctuation mark. But believe you me, if you really want to be ninja draftsman, or if you really want to excel in your profession, all you have to focus is on perfection. There are thousands of lawyers that are drafting, but what separates you from being a great lawyer in comparison to others is how much time you are putting in your draft and how much effort you are investing in your draft. If you make an impeccable draft that is error free, believe you me, you will have people coming back to you, telling you, complimenting you, and asking you to draft more of such documents for you. And then finally, that was all about drafting. And then finally, my parting tip to you would be that, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that your draft is concise, it is not lengthy. Do not go on the length of the draft, because length is never a matter. If you feel that your what you're trying to say can suffice in half a page, reduce it to half a page. If you think that it'll require a couple of more pages, go ahead and do it, but do not overdo things. When you stretch your drafting or when you stretch your idea too much, people tend to get bored. So your aim is to finish what you're trying to speak in a given number of sentences, so that you do not have to face the boredom of whoever is reading it. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's one last thing that I'd like to tell you. Drafting is not something that will come to you in a single day. Drafting is a skill that needs to be developed, that needs to be nurtured day in and day out. It is a gradual process that can only be achieved if you're consistent. If you consistently read what you are, if you consistently read your drafts, if you consistently make an endeavor to learn new words, if you are consistent with respect to reading the new judgments that are there, the new law that is coming every day, I'm sure your drafting will make a difference. And given today's times when people are so cautious about drafting their agreements and contracts and letters and communications, I feel, in my opinion, to my mind, drafting in the coming years will assume so much significance that there'll be specialized subjects that only teach you how to draft communications. I think in the coming years, drafting will be something that will become an exclusive domain of law, that there'll be lawyers who only draft great communications. And seeing that requirement, it is important that you start learning things from today itself, because the early you start, the more the advantage you would stand to gain over a later period of time. So that was all about it. Now I'm open to questions if at all there are any. And last but not the least, thank you so much, Draft Panacea team, and especially Ashay and Kriti, who have invited me to this great webinar. I mean, it was indeed absolutely delightful to have chatted with you all and shared my 2 cents on drafting as a domain in the legal profession. So thank you very much. Ashay, back to you.
So glad to hear such kind words from you, Mr. Gagandeep. And I'd like to say that it's a wonderful session, and I cannot just deliver it in mere words that how beautifully you have summed up the nitty-gritties of drafting, because we have never thought of drafting in such an exciting and such an interesting way. But the keywords and the techniques which you have introduced in drafting is phenomenal. And you have truly just upgraded the level of drafting and the things we see in drafting. So this is no more a monotonous task for us. And thank you so much for taking your time out and beautifully summing up everything. And I'd like to also highlight that the tools which you have focused upon, that is vocabulary and judgment and the technique which you have told about storytelling and analysis and everything. So all of this is beautiful, and I cannot just express, as I already told, I cannot just express in mere words that how beautifully you have done this. But also we have certain questions which we would
Yes.
like to just highlight. So there are certain questions, I think. Ajitesh is asking something. Yeah. So Ajitesh asks that how do one pick and choose the facts which should be pleaded and which should be dropped?
Yes, so Ajitesh, that's a great question. So, when it comes to drafting any type of pleading, it becomes very important to keep in mind and choose only relevant facts. So, for instance, if I am filing an anticipatory bail petition, it is important to define the course of events that have led to registration of FIR, what transaction or what events perpetrated such registration of FIR, how it is going to affect me, and whether or not I am apprehending an imminent arrest or danger to my life and liberty. And at the end, like I said, always ask for the appropriate relief that you are seeking. But essentially, you may pick the facts that are directly linked to your pleadings and drop the ones which may not really have a grave impact on the relief which you are seeking. So maybe those facts which may not be too relevant to the prayer that you've made to the court, or the request that you're putting forth, those facts may be dropped. But of course, you always have an option to make a passing reference of these of such kind of facts. But please remember, at the end of the day, your facts are the dominating factor. So ensure that they are concise and they relate directly to what you are seeking before any authority and any court. And of course, remember that if you are giving a huge list of facts, you might end up confusing the person who's reading it. So limit your facts to those facts which are absolutely important and relevant for adjudication of a particular matter.
Yeah. So I hope that answers the question. And now we'll move on to second question, and that is from Soumya Shri, and she asks that what kind of internship should one look for with respect to drafting, given the law colleges don't focus on legal drafting? I hope you can personally help her.
Well, sure, it'll be my pleasure. So, Soumyashri, see, I am not in knowledge of any sort of internship that would give you a hands-on experience on only and only drafting. You must have seen, and as a matter of fact, since the past 8 or 9 months since the pandemic started, I've seen a lot of students opting for virtual internships for small timelines, say for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, trying to get their hands on whatever they can with respect to learning things about the law. But, at the end of the day, I am of the opinion, and that's my personal opinion, that one should shun these short-term drafting. One should shun these short-term internships and focus on longer durations of internships, because what happens is that when you enroll for a certain internship, 2 weeks or 4 weeks are only spent understanding the domain of work, the kind of work that you are supposed to undertake, and the environment as a whole. So, on the contrary, if you're joining an institution or a company or a lawyer for a longer period of duration, you would realize that for the first 2 or 3 weeks, your mentor or the person under whom you're interning is going to, keenly observe whether or not you're interested in working or not. As you progress into the subsequent months, you would realize that you would start getting a better quality of work. Gradually you will get to research about certain laws. Then when you develop a sense of confidence in the person under whom you're interning, maybe then you'll get work that talks about drafting small applications and then subsequently heading to new ones. So go for longer internships, that's one. If you're looking for internship with respect to drafting, I'd say that start on your own. Judgments are easily available on the internet. There is a whole lot of apps and websites, and in fact the dictionary in itself is a reservoir of new words. So learn new words, start writing articles, and get it checked from your seniors, and the idea is to develop a view and a talent of drafting by your own. Like I said at the very beginning, that drafting is self-taught. So the more you focus on your own, developing your own personality, the better you will be at drafting legal pleadings.
Yeah, that's a great take. So, Kumari Meda is asking that whether there are where there are parallel remedies, how do you choose the appropriate one?
So Kumari Medha, yes, I can read the question, but the question is, uh, I haven't been really able to gauge the intent of the question. But if I'm not too wrong, what I'm trying to understand is that she's asking as to how do you figure out which type of pleading and what is the recourse to law that one is to adopt to in case there is a certain issue that arises in law. So again, like I said, that there is when you have parallel remedies, there will be certain courts that direct you to a remedy that is to an A remedy, and there will be certain courts that will direct to you to a B remedy. But the idea is, if you want to know about the correct set of remedy, you will have to advert to judgments, you will have to advert to law commentaries, and you will have to take note of the law, the prevailing law, in order to realize and understand which law is best suited for your client, and what is the majority opinion of courts, and what can actually help your client in the best manner possible.
Yeah. So Kiran wants you to share certain formats for contract drafting. That would be of great help, she says. So that is not exactly a question, but how would you like to react to that?
Kiran, I thank you for the question, but you may always get in touch with me on LinkedIn or perhaps even otherwise, and I'd be more than happy to share formats, and then you can put in your own inputs and make it customized so as to suit the need of your client or perhaps the person for whom you're drafting, and I think that should be of great help to you.
Yeah, also Karan, we are also into same stuff, so you can also contact us, and we can also connect with Mr. Gagandeep and get the right drafts under his supervision to you. So there's another question from Someshri, and she asks that how do you see e-contracts and technology interacting with drafting in the future?
To be honest, e-contracts I think are evolving. However, I think it will be a little longer before they actually occupy a prominent position in the field of law. But essentially, no matter how much e-contracts come in and into usage, at the end of the day, you do need a human element to ensure that your client gets the best clauses in certain contracts and the best terminologies and conditions that are well suited to his interests, so that he at the end of the day does not have to face any legal battle. So though e-contracts are picking up speed, but one, there'll be a lot of time before lawyers all around the globe can actually adjust to such formats, and number two, there is no denying that human element of law is yet to be replaced, and I'm sure it will stay for all times to come.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we concur on all points with you, and I also would like to say that now is the time that like-minded people who are talking about drafting and people who want to focus upon drafting as a separate discipline come together and focus upon things
Absolutely.
like that. And that is where we come in, and we are giving our efforts to in the same direction. And now the session, sir, has been a wonderful one, and the questions, I have seen that the questions are very good, and the questions have really been answered so insightfully by you. And I thank you so much for giving out your time on your
My
Saturday
pleasure.
evening to us.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Yeah.